Good evening, everybody. Tonight we have two professors that are giving us their time to be with us and talking about popular topics in physics and astronomy, as well as their relation to Star Trek. Professor John Barrett and Professor Daniel Wolfson. Professor Barrett is an emeritus professor of physics and teaches the popular course 7 ideas. Professor Wolfson is adjunct professor of university studies and teaches study strategy courses for 7 ideas. Without further ado, welcome both professors.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I would be Professor Wolfson. Professor Barrett, I think, is helping Dr. Einstein get off stage. But yeah, we're here to talk about physics and Star Trek. I'm representing fiction, he's representing science.
What do you mean, Willis? I'm representing the real thing here. Right?
That's right.
The real thing.
But I'm representing possibilities.
By the way, what was that all about? That guy, he told me he's something like 18-year-old freshman or something like that, and I said, dude, you need to get off the weed and get to, that's bad stuff. He said, weed, I'm not allowed to do that. And I'm like,
we're on there already, huh?
That's your anti-drug message. I'm required to do that every lecture I give, right? Some of you know that, because a couple of you are my students.
I think it might have been that swine flu, actually.
Yeah. Perhaps. So, as Professor Wolfman Dean said, I'm John. As Professor Wolfman said, we're here to talk a little bit. I don't have any idea. They just said, we need to talk some physics, some, relativity, quantum mechanics. I said, boy, that on its outset sounds boring. I said, no. So where do we start? Well, let's start at the beginning. 15 billion years ago, there was no universe. Imagine there was no stars, moon, sun, galaxies. All of the atoms, from the tiniest chairs of which you're sitting, to the stars, the most gigantic galaxies, was formed in a point smaller than the head of a pin. And for some reason, we don't know how or why, a gigantic explosion took place. And in the flicker of an eye, all of the mass and matter and energy of the universe was formed. And it began to expand. And 15 billion years later, we can see that expansion thanks to the energy that hits our eyes in the form of light. Now, I don't know if you believe that. In fact, it's a good dose of questioning and that type of thing is good. Not cynicism, but questioning and doubting is fine. That's what you hear about in large case. But regardless, as Dan said, we introduced ourselves. Dan John, I'm the physics guy, but physics seems to scare people. I have more students come to my class say, when I started this thing, I just had big sweaty palms, But now I see that it is something that you can grasp. As a matter of fact, you all learned physics a long time ago. It's nothing more than the simple laws of nature. I like to use the example of in class that I begin first day, where I say, you learned it when you were in your diapers, in your crib, little in the crib, and you weren't getting any attention, and then you started to scream. Nobody paid any attention, so you took your pacifier, threw it against the wall, and it came off at the same angle that it went in. You scratched a little bald 2-year-old head, and you said, ooh. Took a little Nerf basketball, started shooting hoop, trying to be LeBron James. Now, the fact that you're sitting here means you didn't quite get to that far, to that point, but LeBron learned it just like we did. And that's all it is. It's an explanation in lots of times scientific terms and mathematics of nothing more than everyday life. So we're going to explore that a little bit. And as I say, we're going to kind of put a little dose of Star Trek in, since some of you will be hanging out, I hope more than not, to see the movie. And you might find out that Star Trek, in its 5-year mission, that's now lasted, 45 years, has changed us. In fact, what really happened, and then we'll get started, what really happened has happened in the last century. Most people don't understand that, because most of you guys, and me, and my parents, and your parents and grandparents, were in 19th century science, believe it or not. We haven't upgraded. It's not an accusation, it's just the nature of the beast that we haven't made it to 20th century science. If you know names like Planck and Bohr and Maxwell, I'd be super surprised. Heisenberg, some of you I can tell just by looking at you. Yeah, I can check that name out and know that. But by and large, those names are obscured right now. They shouldn't be. They should be up there with Britney Spears and Brad Pitt and Jonas Brothers.
Now he's talking fiction.
Yeah, well, 1,000 years from now, those names will all be gone. But the main names that I'm talking about won't be. Why? Because we are in a revolution. We are in a super revolution right now. Unlike any other in existence. 100 years ago, people from here in Kent were going by horse and buggy on dirt roads to get to Akron. Yeah, and people still live in log cabins out in western Ohio, probably. Now, don't get me wrong, they had the electric light bulb, Thomas Alva Edison. They had Henry Ford, this young guy was working on this assembly line so that we could all have cars, and call them clunkers and then trade them in for a new clunker, basically, a new car like that. My aunt lives down in Fort Myers, Florida. She was one of the first women to drive a car down Market Avenue in Cleveland, or in Canton, Ohio. Anybody from Canton? And yet she was a little ahead of her time. Women just weren't allowed to do that. Ladies, you've come a long way, and you deserve that, as most of us do. So let's explore a little bit. Where should we start? Okay, as far as the topics, we're just going to hit a few topics here and see.
Well, some of the topics we want to talk about are topics that are in the Star Trek movie, which of course is being shown after this. And one of the topics that we talk about is the ultimate speed limit. Okay, and this has to do with what?
Well, I don't know how many different surrounding areas where we don't have speed traps, right? Mr. Wilson's an attorney, and he knows. Laws are of manner to be broken. You might escape that 50-mile-an-hour limit up on Route 8 there by Boston Heights, where that guy from Boston Heights sits there 24/7 with a little laser. Ever seen that one? And he's there all the time. If you want to see a laser radar in action, just check that out. You might be able to break that. But nature set a law that a speed limit you won't break. And I bet again, a handful of you know that's not more than that. 186,282 miles in 1 second. That's 7 times around the Earth. Now, Star Trek, Dune, and the rest, and Babylon 5, and many of these other shows have gone beyond that. How did you do that? We'll get to that in a second. Let me explain the reality, okay, which is also oftentimes illusion. Let me explain to you a little of what we call relativity here, all right? Maybe just see if I can't summarize it down. Let's do it like this. Let's say he and I are standing here. We both have a softball, and I throw it at him at 60 miles an hour. At the same time, he releases a softball at me at 40. And they collide somewhere in the center. What would be the impact, Steve? You don't have to have rocket scientists to understand relativity. Believe it or not, when we get down here, you can understand it. Believe it or not. You'll be able to go over to the physics department and say, here's how it works. They'll say, yeah. And they'll hit about 100 miles an hour. Right? But then I toss mine at 60. He tosses his at 40. Okay? And are they going to hit it at 100 miles an hour? No, he's tossing it the other direction. What's going to happen? Well, that 60 mile an hour got to catch up with a 40 mile an hour somewhere over here, right? Common sense. We've got relative velocity equations for this, but common sense says it's going to hit it at 20 mile an hour, right? That's why head-on collisions are so much more devastating. Yeah, man, kinetic energy and all that stuff. Rear-enders aren't so bad unless you cause the guy in front of you to fishtail and they go over a cliff. Then you're in trouble. That's collateral damage. Yeah, they got that one too. Anyway, how does this work? How does this fit into relativity? That is relativity right there. Here we go. How many from Cleveland, Cleveland Heights, anywhere around that? Okay. Cleveland has not won a world professional sports basically ever. Back in 62, I believe it was, or something like that, Jim Brown, and the Browns won what they call the world. But nobody's beyond one. Super Bowl, we even now will with Shaq and LeBron's. But